Hey, welcome to the 19th lesson on C++. In this lesson, we will explore concepts such as constructors, destructors, and the keyword this. First, let's talk about constructors. Constructors are essentially the same as methods, or in other words, functions. The only difference is that constructors are called automatically when creating an object based on a specific class. So, every time you instantiate an object, the constructor is invoked, and in this constructor, you can execute any code that needs to run each time an object is created. To create a constructor, it is essential to declare it within the public access modifier. If you define it in another access modifier, objects won't have access to this constructor, and you won't be able to create objects. Therefore, constructors should be defined as public. Unlike methods, constructors do not require specifying a return type. Instead, you simply use the same name as the class for your constructor. For example, if your class is named building, your constructor should have the same name. Open parentheses and curly brackets to define the constructor's body. Here, we've created an empty constructor, one that takes no parameters and performs no actions. In an empty class, such a constructor implicitly exists but is usually not explicitly defined. If we run our program, we'll see that this constructor has no impact, and the program will function as usual. Now, let's modify this constructor to accept two parameters, similar to the parameters in our setData function. Essentially, in this constructor, we'll set these parameters as values for our class fields. This modification allows us, during object creation, to pass these values, which will immediately be assigned to our fields. If we don't provide these values, an error will occur because we now have a constructor that expects values, yet we are creating objects without supplying them. To resolve this error, we can simply open parentheses after creating the object and pass some values inside. In my case, for the school object, I will pass the year 2000 in the name. We can then remove any additional lines. Similarly, for the house object, I will do the same, passing some values. Now, what have we achieved? We have a situation where, during the creation of any object, we invoke a constructor that takes two parameters. We pass these two parameters, and they are immediately set to our fields. If we run our program, we will see that it works just as it did before. However, now we are using significantly fewer lines of code than before. When creating an object, we can immediately set all the necessary data. Additionally, inside the constructor, you can execute any code you wish. For example, you could establish a connection to a database, open a specific file, and so on. In general, any code within the constructor will be executed every time you create an object based on this class. Let's further improve our code. The thing is, we have some code repetition, and that's not ideal. Therefore, in the building constructor, it would be better to call the setData method and pass these parameters to the method. The method itself will then handle setting the values. Also, it is worth noting that when working with constructors, just like when working with methods, you can perform their overloading. That is, currently, I have only one constructor, but similarly, I can create another constructor. Let this constructor be the default one. In other words, it will not take any parameters and will not do anything. Now, I can either pass parameters or not pass parameters when creating an object. Depending on this, one of the constructors will be selected. Now let's talk about destructors. Destructors, as is clear from their name, are essentially something opposite. And indeed, they differ from constructors in that destructors are called at the moment of object destruction. An object itself is destroyed when our program terminates. Destructors are convenient for specifying mandatory actions, such as closing a file or a database, or something similar. In a destructor, you can describe some mandatory action that needs to be done in any case when an object is being deleted. Let's write a simple information output in our destructor. the destructor is created in a similar way to the constructor, with the only difference being the tilde sign before the destructor's name. Then you write the name of your class and, similarly, use parentheses and curly brackets. Also, I want to note that usually destructors do not take any parameters since they cannot be passed at the moment of object destruction. Here you can write some code. In my case, I will write a simple data output, delete object, in a new line. Now, if we run something like this, we will notice that the destructor is called at the moment of object destruction, and the message was displayed. That is, only at the moment when we have already worked with the objects, at the moment when our program was ending, the destructor was called. Now, let's consider a keyword known as this. The this keyword in C++ represents a pointer to the current object that invokes a class member. It is used to resolve identifier conflicts between method arguments and class members. In our case, this can be used to refer to class members in case of name conflicts. Let's make changes to your code to incorporate the this keyword. For this, I suggest modifying the setData method. To do this, it is necessary to write the this keyword before our variables, followed by a minus sign and a right angle arrow. We will do the same in the second line. In this example, I use this to explicitly indicate that we are referring to class members, not the arguments of the setData method. Although, in our case, the use of this is not mandatory, it can make the code clearer, especially in more complex programs. And you can use this anywhere in constructors, in methods. In those moments where you need to specify from which exact place you are taking your method or field, in those places, you can use this keyword. Well, our lesson comes to an end. In this lesson, we got acquainted with constructors, which are called upon object creation, destructors, which are called upon object deletion, and also with the keyword this, which points to the current class we are working with. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you all, goodbye.